Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, we're going to begin this evening first by conducting some business that the council has. We did not meet today during the day in regular session. We typically meet on Tuesdays, but due to some items being rescheduled, we had a fairly light agenda, and we decided that we would conduct a few items of business tonight at 7 o'clock and then proceed directly into the public hearing. So we will now proceed with that. This is the Tuesday. Sure. But we will ask, if you are here to testify, please bring your testimony up now. That would be helpful because we have a lot of paper to collate and distribute. So please bring your testimony up if you have printed testimony. So this is the Tuesday, September 25th session of the County Council, and there are no announcements, petitions, or minutes, so we'll proceed directly to the consent calendar. Thank you. It's been moved by Mr. Berliner, seconded by Mr. Rice. The consent calendar has a number of items on it today. We have appointments to a wide array of council commissions and committees, and we have the receipt of an important report about community grants that the council will be discussing at length in a future time. And we have the receipt of an important study by the Council's Office of Legislative Oversight about racial equity in government decision-making. Council Vice President Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to thank Dr. Bonner Tompkins and Victoria Hall for this really wonderful report on racial equity in government decision-making, lessons from the field. As everybody probably knows, this council did adopt a resolution to move towards the adoption of a equity policy for county government. And the second step was, of course, to have some information regarding what other jurisdictions have done, what type of framework or template they've used. This report highlights many of those cutting-edge practices that we hope to learn from. As then pretty soon, hopefully, my goal is that when we have a new council and new executive, that we can begin the real work of putting forth a framework for stakeholder input, for lessons contained in this report, for example, and then move towards a piece of legislation that we can adopt to take Montgomery County to that next level. So I do commend this report for anybody who wants to just understand a little bit what it is that these other jurisdictions have done to move forward their policies and decision-making processes through that lens. It's a really outstanding report, and also, as it was mentioned, another really wonderful report regarding our council community grants. Councilmember Leventhal in HHS has also worked diligently on this issue, and as chair of GO, we have also addressed this and want to look at how we can best modify the council grants process. So with that, I just wanted to make those comments regarding these amazing reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President Navarro. So the motion, consent calendar has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. And now we will move to a public hearing on an item. We have a witness for this item. This is a public hearing on a supplemental appropriation to Montgomery County Public Schools FY18 operating budget entrepreneurial activities fund in the amount of $4,700,000 for school bus safety camera program. An education committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, September 27th. And again, if you're wishing to submit additional material, please do so today. If you're scheduled to testify today, please bring your testimony up. And I'd like to add, if you want to follow this bill or this appropriation, I should say, or any council bill, or you can subscribe to updates from the County Council website, and you will be notified of any change in status of a piece of legislation before the council. So if it moves to committee, if it moves to full council, if there's some update in the staff memorandum, you would get an automatic notification of that. So if there's an issue you're following closely, if it's legislation, you can subscribe to updates on that and then always know the state of play. So now we will have our witness on this item. And I'm not seeing my, thank you. That is Bernadette Engelstad. Miss Engelstad. You know, I believe that we have 3 minutes for each speaker, and at 30, when you turn your mic on at the base of the stand, there's a button at the base of the mic stand, and this will go for the subsequent public hearing, although I may repeat it, but after, you have 3 minutes, and when you have 30 seconds left, the yellow light is going to come on, and by that time, really, the end of your testimony should be in sight. You know, if you don't even quite know how close you are to the ending, then you're not close enough, and that 30 seconds will go quick. So, you know, you should be wrapping up when that light comes on, and if the red light comes on, that means your time is up. I certainly welcome you to finish the sentence that you're in, but please don't begin a new sentence, don't begin a new paragraph. That goes for the hearing tonight, and the reason is because everyone is equal. Everyone has 3 minutes. Nobody's voice counts for more than anyone else's, and if everyone took more than 3 minutes, then we wouldn't have a chance to hear from everyone. So it's important that you all please respect your fellow county residents and adhere to the guidelines that we've established. So sorry for that lecture, but that wasn't really directed at you, Ms. Engelstad, and you're invited to begin your testimony whenever you're ready. It's right at the base of this. There you, that's it.
Oh, it's red. Okay. As the mother of 2 children schooled in Montgomery County and the aunt of a niece and nephew riding Montgomery County school buses, I share the concern over the safety of school transportation. The installation of school bus cameras and the number of driver infractions cited has revealed a deeply troubling situation. My objection is to the allocation request for $4.7 million, assuming there's no misplaced zero in that number, which seems an excessive amount for this program. As a property owner and taxpayer, I ask the Council to authorize a detailed review of this program by comparing it with similar and less expensive programs in school jurisdictions around the country. The Council is undoubtedly aware of the problem of the Dallas County Schools, Texas, in which a media investigation carried out by NBC uncovered extensive corruption perpetrated by the company overseeing the Dallas school bus camera project, the same company contracted by Montgomery County Public Schools for the original installation of 500 school bus cameras. The voter response to that investigation dissolved the historic Dallas County Schools as an operating entity and left area citizens with a debt of some $47 million. As the Council is aware, Bus Patrol, the company currently contracted by Montgomery County Public Schools, is led by an official of that defunct company and employs several senior staff with prior ties to it. As revealed in the Dallas investigation, school bus camera programs in other jurisdictions, Atlanta for example, were able to install cameras at no cost to the school system in exchange for a minimal, agreed-upon percentage of fees derived from paid violations. On its website, Bus Patrol also advertises camera installation, quote, at no cost to municipalities. Yet the Montgomery County School system is requesting this allotment of $4.7 million for the remaining 700 school buses yet to be equipped. In fairness to Montgomery County drivers, the county government webpage for bus safety cites driver inattention and a lack of awareness of the law as the primary source of violations. For this reason, it seems that county school children, drivers, and taxpayers would best be served by a two-pronged approach to this problem, an intensive driver education campaign throughout the school year, and a significant reduction, or better yet, waiver in the cost of the school bus camera program. Thank you. Oops. 14 more seconds. In closing, I ask the council members, one, to authorize a comprehensive review of school bus camera programs in other states with specific regard to the financial agreements in place, and to request recommendations for other industry partners with the goal of significantly reducing the ultimate cost of this program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Engelstead. I'll turn it to the committee chair for Education Committee, Mr. Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And so I just wanted to correct a couple of things that you said, Ms. Engelstad, and I encourage you to pay very close attention to the conversation that we have on September 27th regarding the school bus camera contract. As a matter of fact, it was actually the CEO as well as a Dallas city council member and the Dallas County Superintendent of Schools who were all convicted of that troubling incident of bribery and corruption. But the other remaining members of the company were found of no wrongdoing, and that's the reason why they started their own company. Certainly you can understand that a business that has someone who is corrupt does not reflect on all of the employees of that corporation. We have had nothing but a positive working relationship with this company. This company has installed the cameras. In regards to the contract itself, it is a no-cost contract. They get the money from the citations until it pays for the hardware that was installed. And you had mentioned about the safety aspects and the success of the program. The reality is that we not only have cameras on the outside, but we also have cameras on the inside of every single school bus. That is very different from what you've seen in some of the other locations that you reference. And so we'll be having a very robust conversation with the Public Safety Committee, but I did just want to, for the record, Mr. President, put some things out there that were very clear. We've been paying very close attention to this from the very start. And again, since the authorities found no wrongdoing with other members of the company, feel very confident that we can move forward with this contract and ensure what you began with at the beginning is the safety of all of our children in Montgomery County Public Schools. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairman Rice. All right, well, that concludes that public hearing. Appreciate your participation this evening. Now we'll move to the next item. An item, again, if you're here for the upcoming public hearing on wireless infrastructure, please bring your testimony down. Please bring it to our terrific clerk team here so we can sort the papers and pass them out. We move to another hearing, which will be followed by action. There are no witnesses for this hearing, and this is a supplemental appropriation. It's a public hearing on a supplemental appropriation to the county government's FY19 operating budget, Department of Transportation, in the amount of $73,176 for the replacement of roadside trees. This is funds that have been collected and targeted for specifically the planting of roadside trees, and we do need to take action to appropriate those funds from the fees that are collected, so that is why we have this item before us. And now I need a motion. It's been moved by Mr. Blunder, seconded by Mr. Rice, and this is a show of hands. All those in favor of this appropriation? And that is unanimous. Is that Mr. Unanimous? Yeah. All right, is that all? Sorry, I was, yes. I know, now I was looking to Ms. Lamarce. We all done there? Okay, good. All right, now for the main, what's the phrase? The main show. All right, the big event. Someone said that. Thank you, Mitzi. Okay, well, we're going to proceed. We're a tiny bit ahead of schedule, so if there's anyone who's on a panel, and they haven't gotten here, I doubt that's the case, but if that's the case, we'll be sure to nevertheless fit them in. Wanted to just very briefly make an observation or two as we proceed into this public hearing on an issue that has been contentious, to say the least, challenging. And this is the future of wireless infrastructure in the county. And, you know, the county, I think, has a lot to gain and a lot to lose from this conversation. You know, we think about the future of the wireless industry and the future of what we all do with our devices, our phones, which are for many of us, maybe not all, but for many of us, by our side all the time, and which empower us to achieve the professional or personal goals that we have and are a big part of our lives. The technology that serves these phones is changing. And so that is something that is coming from the wireless industry, and that the infrastructure that they say is the future of how we use our devices. So whatever it is that you do with your device is going to be very much affected by the availability of infrastructure to make it work. And so we've been fortunate in this county to benefit from decisions that were made some time ago to allow large towers to support the installation of fiber in the streets and on utility poles. And we have pretty good coverage in this county for the most part, but not everywhere. And there are certainly neighborhoods that are just beyond the reach of the macro tower. And there are a neighborhood with a dip. You all know when you go into a dip, sometimes that broadcast misses you, and you don't get a good range. There's people who live in those kind of circumstances today, and certainly the Ag Reserve, a lot of people say they don't have adequate coverage there. So there are a lot of people today in this county who do not have adequate coverage. And the question is, in 10 years, will we as a county continue to have the excellent wireless coverage that we have today? And I know that there are many who would like to kind of opt out of that future, or who essentially think that there's an alternative to that future. I'm not aware of what that alternative is, personally. I haven't seen any counter-proposal to the future of the wireless industry's plans for 5G and densification of antennas. But if you have one of those, I hope you'll be bringing it to us tonight in your testimony. But again, I think there's a lot to gain from this initiative for the county. There's also a lot to lose. And what we could lose is control over our streets, control over our property, and we could be forced to subsidize the wireless industry with taxpayer funds, which is not what we want to do. We want to get the benefits without having to unfairly pay costs. And the threat is very real. Tomorrow, the FCC will be voting on a draft order that will take away our county's authority over our own right-of-way and our own ability to charge reasonable fees and rental fees for infrastructure that's on our property, on your property. And the FCC is very much looking to take us out of the picture. And I like the stickers that I see, "Work with us." We would like the FCC to work with us. We would like the industry to work with us. We'd like to be at the table. I think that's what you also want, is for us to be at the table to help make decisions so that we can deploy infrastructure in a manner that is most harmonious. But the FCC wants to take it away, and the state legislature wants to take it away. We saw a bill last year, and we expect it to come back that would take away our local authority. So many of us believe that the right way to protect our local authority is to use it and to demonstrate that we can make good decisions about how to deploy this infrastructure. And we feel that that is a strong appeal to the FCC and to state legislators, that infrastructure can be deployed and preemption is unnecessary. I do want to make a very brief observation. Many of you will likely testify about the health effects, as you see them, of RF emissions. And you're free to say anything you like about that. As you probably know, we are not allowed to make a decision on that basis. If we were to enact a regulation or a zoning and ordinance that seemed to be acting out of concern for that, we would be bounced right out of court with that. It wouldn't last a minute, because we have been preempted on that issue. And I know you don't like it to be preempted. Well, we've already been preempted on that issue, and they're probably going to preempt us on more. But a lot of us think the best shot we have is to actually enact an ordinance. So passed out in the back is a statement the county executive and I released today criticizing the FCC's decision, asking them to work with us. And I invite you to read that, and I have copies of the memorandum from the county executive to the council about this issue. So with that in mind, we will proceed through our hearings. Our hearing tonight, we have an unprecedented number of speakers. I appreciate everyone's great interest in this. I think with 44 speakers, this is the longest list of hearing witnesses that the clerk's office can recall. So we do this for the budget, but we don't typically do it for legislation. So I apologize if we couldn't get you in. There are several people, at least, who could not get in. but this is one of the longest lists we've ever had. That's because we want to make sure everyone has a chance to be heard. Our first panel, again, if you've just arrived and you plan to testify tonight, please bring your testimony up to our clerks on my left. Please bring it up so that they can sort it and pass it out in the proper order. We'll have Sonny Siegel, Earl Stoddard, Jeffrey Slavin, Molly Hauk, Robert Duncan, and Sue Present. All right, so the order will be again Sonny Siegel, Earl Stoddard, Jeffrey Slavin, Molly Hauk, Robert Duncan, and Sue Present. Director Siegel. Actually, let me repeat because some new have arrived. You get 3 minutes. Everyone gets 3 minutes, and you all get 3 minutes. So if you take more than 3 minutes, then you're essentially saying you count for more than anybody else. And I know we all believe we're equals here. We're all residents of Montgomery County. We all pay the same taxes, and we all get the same time. So 3 minutes, please. At 2.5 minutes, that yellow light will come on. At that point, the end of your testimony should be in sight. You should know where you are there. And when the red light comes on, you're welcome to finish your sentence, but please don't begin a new one if you would. All right, Mr. Siegel.
Good evening. I'm Sonny Siegel, County CIO, here to testify on behalf of the County Executive in support of ZTA 1811. I have submitted written remarks and I will briefly highlight a few points. ZTA 1811 is the culmination of 2 years of community engagement and outreach. Through meetings with many residents and wireless industry representatives, the ZTA has significantly evolved to include opportunities for public notice, better enforcement, and retention of conditional use. We thank the County Council for taking action to address small cells in commercial areas, and we respectfully ask you to enact a county solution for small cells in residential areas. The risk of state and federal preemption is high. Preemptive legislation was introduced in Maryland in 2018, and wireless carriers are working to find a sponsor for 2019. A U.S. Senate bill has been introduced to severely restrict local zoning authority over small cell deployments, and tomorrow morning, the FCC is meeting to enact more federal preemption. The best way to demonstrate that additional state and federal preemption is not necessary is to act now and enact good local solutions. Since the executive branch first briefed the Fed Committee on Small Cells 2 years ago, over 55,000 new wireless telephone lines have been subscribed to by Montgomery County residents. Demand is growing. Small cells are coming, and we need a local solution. The ZTA incentivizes deployment on existing taller poles by allowing these as limited use. These poles are on wider streets and require little height increase. The ZTA retains the conditional use with the public hearing for shorter poles in residential areas. We recommend this approach because it is much harder to conceal small cell antennas and equipment on replacement poles in neighborhoods with underground utilities. The county is continuing to lobby federal legislators and regulators to take action to update FCC rules to address radio frequency emissions. The FCC has failed to exercise leadership on this issue, but federal law prevents the county from regulating on the basis of health effects of RF emissions. Finally, this issue has aroused passionate debate. We thank the many residents who attended one of the 4 public meetings and 2 public hearings on this issue, and we thank Sue Present, Rick Myers, Meredith Wellington, Harriet Quinn, and Andy Spivak, who provided specific research and comments on draft legislation. We may not have reached consensus on all points. We think this ZTA is better because of our residents' input, and we respectfully request that the Council provide a local solution to small cell deployment by enacting ZTA 1811. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Siegel. Mr. Stoddard.
Good evening, Council President Reamer and members of the County Council. My name is Earl Stoddard. I'm the Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, and I'm here to testify on behalf of County Executive Isaiah Leggett in support of ZTA 1811. Small cell technology deployment offers significant near-term and long-term benefits for the public safety and first responder community in Montgomery County. Real-time data availability and exchange are critical components necessary for performing the life-saving mission in a more safe and effective manner. Even today, there are significant data exchange requirements that challenge and sometimes exceed the existing network capacity in parts of the county. While our response agencies have developed deployable network enhancement solutions that are used to augment existing infrastructure and reduce gaps in connectivity, those assets require time to deploy and shouldn't be viewed as a surrogate for having a robust network moving forward. We believe small cell technology is part of the building a more robust future system. The future is marked with numerous potential new innovations that will enhance public safety in Montgomery County. These enhancements, however, will also present additional data exchange requirements. We believe it is necessary to highlight a few of these to provide context for our support of Zoning Text Amendment 1811. First, Next Generation 911 is right around the corner and will allow county residents to transmit new types of data, including text, photo, and video, to the Emergency Communications Center, the ECC. The ability to transmit this data relies on the public's ability to access a robust wireless signal. Without enhancements like 5G and its future iterations, this type of seamless, high-fidelity data transmission is impossible for segments in Montgomery County. It is easy to envision a future whereby the public is routinely using live video to interface with the ECC and receive preliminary analytics-driven treatment or safety recommendations. The ECC can simultaneously transmit that data to first responders before they arrive to allow for a more efficient and timely transition of response for each incident type. While the benefits of such transmission are self-evident, they all require robust data availability countywide that does not exist today. In 2012, federal legislation created a program known as FirstNet. This program aims to develop the first nationwide public safety infrastructure to improve fidelity, preemption, security, and resilience in public safety communications. In September 2017, Governor Hogan enrolled the state as an early adopter of FirstNet, and while implementation is ongoing nationwide, one of the first prerequisites of state and local FirstNet completion is enhancement of the existing network. Finally, Montgomery County Public Safety continues to evaluate new technologies, such as unmanned aerial vehicles and other new technologies that require data exchange. We anticipate that this environment will require potential increases in data exchange burden over time. In summary, all of our public safety agencies rely on robust, high-fidelity security networks to enhance and to effectively operate in Montgomery County. The network demands placed on by current and future technologies on those systems require the constant efforts be made to enhance this system.
Thank you, Director Stoddard. Mayor Slavin.
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Slavin, the Mayor of Somerset. As a municipal entity, we take great pride in the stewardship of our town and are actively engaged in many aspects of its safety and aesthetics. We are concerned about the impact that ZTA 1811 would have on our community. First, the bill changes the zoning law so that cell tower antennas and panels can be put on the utility poles 30 feet from our homes, basically in our front yards. This is a reduction from the current 60-foot setback. Other communities have even greater setbacks than even our current 60-foot setback. We urge that the 60-foot setback be retained. Second, the bill changes the zoning law so that base equipment boxes as large as 20 cubic feet could be placed in the public right-of-way. This is an increase from the current allowable 12 cubic feet. This is a box so large that a small person could stand inside, and these would be on the ground near the utility poles in the public right-of-way. Additionally, the bill does not limit the number of equipment boxes that would be allowed. These towers and this equipment could be installed with no notice to the community and no prior hearing. In our town, we have above-the-ground utility poles. Antennas attached to utility poles occur as limited use, and therefore there is no hearing. While the installation of new towers would involve a hearing, we understand this bill even strips away a community's right to appeal a decision made by the Office of Zoning Administrative Hearings. The only recourse would be expensive litigation initiated by residents and paid for out of our own pockets. We are also concerned about the detrimental effect this would have on our home values. We refer you to the report, Impact of Communications Towers and Equipment on Nearby Property Values. The report concluded, as a general matter, visible utility structures do adversely affect property values. Finally, we note that currently the county has no provision for post-installation inspection. As a result, quite a number of poles in Montgomery County are not in the location cited on the application and are much closer to homes than are currently allowable by law. Certainly, a provision in this legislation should be instituted to mandate post-installation inspection and certification so that the poles are in the current place and operating safely. This reform should occur before any legislation is enacted. We understand the Council is concerned about the latest FCC rules which prohibit de facto and de jure moratoria on small cell deployment. However, other jurisdictions around the country that face the same regulatory challenges have successfully created zoning plans which do not take away the community's right to public notice. Neighboring Prince George's has a process which includes public notice, mapping, and hearing. Why are setbacks reduced to 30 feet in Montgomery County? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. And Molly Hauk. Molly Hauk.
My name is Molly Hauk.
Yep, and the mayor, you'll turn your button off.
My name
please.
is Molly Hauk, and I am speaking to you on behalf of myself and my friend Sue Jacobson. She would be here today, but she's on her way back from Utah from a trip planned before the hearing was scheduled. In the footnotes, I have listed peer-reviewed studies establishing the connection between non-thermal radio frequency radiation from cell phones and brain cancer known as glioblastoma. As the rise of our use of wireless devices occurs, the occurrence of the cell phone brain cancer is also rising. It's the same cancer that killed Teddy Kennedy, Beau Biden, and John McCain. This is what Sue has asked me to say. My daughter Rebecca Pardo, was born and raised in Montgomery County. When she was a student at Wooten High School, she worked on the stage crew for every play the entire 4 years she was there. Since there was no way to know when she would need a ride home, we got her a cell phone so she could call home as needed. Like many kids with cell phones, she used it regularly and rarely used our landline, even when she was at home. Like many people, she kept her cell phone next to her bed and never turned it off, so her head was constantly bombarded with microwave radiation. She used it throughout college and then in California, where she worked and met a wonderful young man. She was engaged to be married and was happier than she had ever been. The summer of 2014, Becca was having bad headaches. The doctors kept diagnosing and treating her for sinus infections. Unfortunately, they were wrong. At 7 a.m. on Sunday, August 31st, Becca's wonderful fiancé, Scott, called. He was very concerned and wanted to know what to do. Becca had had another terrible headache and more nausea. I told him to take her to the ER. They put her on IVs for pain and nausea. When the pain meds did not help, they finally did a scan of her brain and told her she had a 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter cyst and they would do surgery in the morning. 2 hours later, she had a massive seizure, and they had to put her on life support. They did immediate surgery and found a tumor, a large, malignant, and fast-growing glioma. It was glioblastoma type 4, which is always fatal. I was unable to go to California Sunday, but got there the next day. She was still on life support and in a deep coma. Nothing could be done. After much discussion with doctors and support staff, we agreed to discontinue life support as there was no possibility that she would ever regain consciousness. I lay beside her and held her. Her brother sat beside her and held her hand when they disconnected the machines that were breathing for her. She died at age 24 of glioblastoma. The most painful thing in the world is to watch your child die. Her father, fiancé, brother, and I will never be the same.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hauk. Appreciate your sharing that story. Mr. Duncan, Robert Duncan.
Good evening. My name is Robert Duncan, and I'm here representing the Fairland Acres Homeowners Association. and I came with a petition to improve our cellular phone reception. The Fairland Acres single-family housing development is located in Cloverly, Maryland, and our community has always had poor cellular reception. We believe that this poses a major inconvenience and, more importantly, a severe safety issue in light of the fact that 70% of all 911 calls are made by cell phones. We, the undersigned of this petition, are concerned and impacted citizens, taxpayers, and cellular customers who request that our elected and appointed leaders act now in doing their part to provide us with what most citizens take for granted, good cell phone reception in our community, in our homes. We want 4 bars and 5G. We have become aware of what we believe is the solution in our community, and that is the strategic application of the new small cell 5G technology. We would like to be prioritized among the first communities as this new technology is implemented in Montgomery County. This, after having suffered with poor reception since the beginning of coverage in our area, in our view, is only fair. We would like for our county and state elected and appointed officials to represent our concerns by making it clear to cellular providers and other parties involved with the telecommunications infrastructure process that this situation for us is a serious safety issue, as we experience situations on a daily basis where important and sometimes emergency cellular calls are dropped, disconnected, or even unable to be connected. Working from home is a problem when we have to find the right corner of the house where a call can be made. Visitors who rely on GPS to find us are often lost in their coverage as their coverage drops. A walk at dusk for our seniors is a vulnerable experience when they can't immediately reach out for emergency medical assistance or report suspicious activity. Our society as a whole has become more and more reliant on our cellular devices, and we at Fairland Acres are no exception. We feel that the cellular providers have not been proactive in addressing reception issues, and in the view of our community, they should be the first to identify problem reception and make that information publicly available and work towards resolving the issues. If Verizon can benefit from advertising that they offer 98% of coverage for the nation, why can't they show interest in the community that exists 2 miles from their Montgomery County facility that's part of that remaining 2%? This poor coverage area is shown as excellent on their public-facing coverage map. Finally, we want providers to immediately stop the practice of charging their customers for in-home signal boosters that are provider-specific band-aids to the larger problem. We want our cellular carriers, in partnership with our elected leadership, to commit to solving the poor reception issues in Fairland Acres and in the other equally impacted communities in Montgomery County. We want 4 bars and 5G.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Sue Present.
Good evening, council members. Some of you have already committed to protecting residents and neighborhoods concerning wireless telecommunications facilities, WTFs. Thank you. And I appreciate Mr. Leventhal's amendment to ZTA 1802, first passed by the Fed Committee. It shields residential neighborhood zones and stipulated that 1802's results be evaluated before a subsequent ZTA's consideration. I also appreciate Mr. Elrich having pressed the county executive staff to fix administrative and regulatory problems that have festered for years. The executive staff failed to provide proposed regulations by June as promised. The only proposal you have is this premature, defective ZTA, which eliminates residential protections and imposes deceptive, dangerous, and inappropriate standards. Take utility poles. For replacement poles, the ZTA requires the prior utility pole to be removed within 180 days. That deadline is aspirational. Apparently, DPS cannot meaningfully enforce any removal deadline. And according to staff, nearby utility poles get replaced too. So for each antenna's replacement pole, we could see 3 to 5 sets of double poles. But the only set with the antenna is the one that the ZTA has a deadline for, albeit unenforceable. Safety studies show that additional and thicker poles contribute to traffic injuries and fatalities. So there are legitimate safety reasons to protect our neighborhood roads from unnecessary increases in double poles, new poles, and thicker poles. Eliminating our protective 60-foot dwelling setbacks would usher in more road hazards by giving antennas virtually unfettered access to neighborhood utility poles. The FAQs assure us that all new non-replacement poles get conditional use hearings and require a 300-foot dwelling setback. But for new utility poles, that's not so. Ignoring Assistant County Attorney Royalty's advice, DPS authorizes new utility poles for antennas as permitted and limited uses. DPS helps industry applicants dodge zoning regulations. This ZTA does not protect or respect residents. Tonight, I ask you to keep us safe, preserve our communities, and to first fix the dysfunction, ensure our fair inclusion and representation, and meaningful enforcement of regulatory protections. Consider our comprehensive antennas proposal, CAP, as the foundation for a collaborative solution between residents and county leaders. Please reject this ZTA. Work with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. President. All right. I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Stoddard. Thank you very much for your testimony. If I understood you right, you're saying that the future of 911 is in video, sort of like Skype, where it's live video, and you have your phone, and you show either yourself or the setting that you're in, and then somehow that is being relayed to the 911 center? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So we can actually, the technology you described is the current iteration of what's in FaceTime or Skype. You could directly contact, we would have providers in the ECC who are doing immediate relay of information about where to apply pressure for a wound, where to, if it's information around where a suspect is for a police incident, where they should be hiding. It can be real-time intervention-based information that would help protect them before the first responders even arrive.
And it's your belief that the existing infrastructure, the large towers, won't allow for that to be deployed, and you need to have small cells?
As you alluded to in the beginning, in your briefing before, some areas of our county don't have coverage today, and this is going to be a huge bandwidth increase when we, start to take these 911 calls in this manner. And it's going to rely on not just, can you have a connection, but can you maintain a high fidelity video contact with the person in the field, such that you can actually see with granularity the injury or the details emerging. And so it's going to increase our data requirements for sure, and as you alluded to, there are places already in Montgomery County that don't meet the current data standards.
And I'm sure a lot of those calls that come in on cell phones to the 911 center are from residential areas?
Correct. Absolutely. You think about every car crash that occurs, in a neighborhood street. People aren't in their homes a lot of times when they're calling 911, so they're in the public space, and those are the kind of calls that we largely benefit by a residential increase in connectivity.
Thank you. All right, my colleagues may have questions. Ms. Florine.
Thank you. Mr. President, I've seen a lot of community testimony over the years and received a lot of very thorough presentations. But I've got to say, everyone should know, Mr. President here has written a treatise on the subject. I don't remember how many pages it is, but it's thorough and very complete, and we'll be paying very close attention to it as we work through this. But it's very impressive. Thank you, Mr. President.
Indeed. Thank you for your knowledgeable participation. Mr. Leventhal.
Mayor Slavin raised a question that a number of constituents have raised with me, and I want to ask either Mr. Siegel or, is it Dr. Stoddard? Or Mr. Slavin, I'm sorry, or Mr. Zients, in general enforcement of the zoning law, if something is out of compliance with the zoning law, it would be the Department of Permitting Services that would be responsible for enforcement of any violations. That was a question asked by the mayor of the town of Somerset. Do we have confidence in the case of these large companies that if they don't adhere to a setback or if they install a structure in a place that was not in the application, that the Department of Permitting Services would in fact be able to pursue enforcement against the wireless cable company?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Leventhal. The Department of Permitting Services is currently working to actually reinforce and enhance the processes they're using for enforcing the zoning laws, especially the case in point for pole removal, as an example. And by the same token, for pole placement. It was mentioned that poles are not removed, some poles are not placed where they're permitted to be placed. This is going to be stronger going forward. And we in DTS and Department of Permitting Services have been working with the county attorney to work out methods and processes that will be enforced going forward.
So, as in the case of other violations, a notice of violation would be given to the company that installed the structure, and then fines would ramp up according to some sort of schedule. Are we afraid that the FCC might step in and protect these wireless companies from such enforcement, particularly the imposition of large fines or fees for failure to adhere to the law?
There are some practical reasons that the industry cites from time to time where delays are occurring because of the transition and the replacement of equipment that's on one pole to another pole. And so that's an intra-industry situation. So it's possible that they may get extensions and stay orders on removing certain poles until they are able to come to some reconciliation between the companies that all their equipment has been moved. There's a lot of co-location on these poles between these companies, which in a way is positive. In other words, then we don't have a pole placed there for every company. But it is correct that we are going to be enforcing more rigorously going forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Elrich.
I guess the first thing is I'm bothered that we don't have any regulatory things to look at. I mean, we asked for improvements, and a number of us, I thought, made it pretty clear that we expected to see new language and new processes as part of this process. So here we are with the ZTA with nothing to speak to what's going to be done. And I mean, have any of the advocates up there, have you been part of any meetings where they discussed what new regulatory processes there might be? Plans in the ether. Did you see the plans in the ether?
No.
Aha. You can't have a process that doesn't involve the community when the biggest issue was the utter lack of involvement on the part of the community in the previous processes. And have any of the polls that were documented to be in violation that the residents brought us with nice pictures saying these polls weren't supposed to, any of them been removed? No. So we can't even remove the polls that we know were put in places where they shouldn't be. I don't need new regulations. The old regulations said the polls shouldn't be there. So I don't understand the unwillingness to enforce the removal of things that have been placed where they shouldn't be placed. I'm not comfortable going forward with this part if we can't get the regulatory environment right. I had a question about 5G. Is anybody deploying 5G right now out there in these neighborhoods, or are these 4G? It's in several experimental cities. Anybody on the panel there know whether these are 4G or 5G?
It's 4G presently.
Right. So people aren't going to get a 5G. I mean, you don't need towers every 500 feet if you're doing 4G. The 5G seems to be the one that
Your
requires.
questions might be better answered by some of the industry representatives who are coming up soon.
I assume we've got people who understand it enough since they're involved in it. I mean, I can ask the industry representatives if you want.
We're not
I
doing
guess,
it from the audience.
fine, we can't talk to the, my concern is that I think these are 4G.
They are 4G.
And they are,
Presently.
that's what I thought. And so if people are being told they're getting 5G towers, they're actually not getting 5G towers yet. So you're not going to get we're not going to get a 5G solution until they actually deploy them. And the parts of the county that have bad service could have been fixed with the other towers a long time ago. And I think the gentleman's point about his neighborhood is if Verizon, whoever your provider is over there, had chosen to properly locate towers, you wouldn't be in this mess today. I mean, there are dead spots, because I've been through this, where people identified dead spots, and the cell phone companies, after sometimes a very long time, finally get around to putting a tower in a dead spot. So telling people, or if people have been given the impression that you need towers every 500 feet to fix the dead spots, as long as it's 4G, that's not even factually true. I'll just stop there.
All right. All right. I think we'll move on to the next panel. While we do, our next panel is Ed Donahue, Harriet Quinn, Sergio Ortiz, Donna Barron, Anthony Fayola, and Theodora Scarato. Thank you. All right. So first up, we have Ed Donahue on behalf of T-Mobile. And you may begin when you are ready, Mr. Donahue.
Thank you, President Reamer, members of the council. My name is Ed Donahue, local counsel for T-Mobile. We are speaking in support of zoning text amendment 18-11. There's certain discussion about coverage challenges in the county, and that's certainly the case. What we think is that this text amendment strikes a really excellent balance between what's needed in order to address those coverage gaps and capacity problems and to keep up with the demand. T-Mobile has, like the other carriers, is experiencing steadily increasing demand, particularly on data. Thus far this year, 2018, they saw as much data traffic on the network since 2013 and 16 combined. They're staggering numbers. And in order to make the migration to 5G, which is in its infancy, we really do have to densify in order to address those capacity problems. The other thing that I think we've met with several of you, and there seems to be this disconnect, that I think it's important that the council knows that remaining in place is the CUP process, the hearing before OZA, and importantly, the Tower Committee. The Tower Committee really does an excellent job. I'm bothered when I hear staff isn't paying attention or they're not enforcing DPS maybe. We find the Tower Committee and the county executive staffs to be really excellent. And I think that the important protections of the Tower Committee and the hearing before the hearing examiners, it's important to know that for towers, for poles less than 22 feet or less than 30 feet from home, those go through a full-blown hearing before the hearing examiner. And that remains in place. If this text amendment is passed, that remains in place. It was discussed earlier about the E911 and some of the medical attributes, and county staff did a nice job explaining that to you. But really, the small cells are really necessary for us to keep up with the E911 requirements. And those requirements, it's really significant when you hear folks talking about the FirstNet and other things, that the mere fact that 70-some percent, 74% of calls to 911 come from a mobile device, and oftentimes from a car, from the side of the road. And it's critically important that those 911 calls get through. And importantly, if you can communicate your trouble, that they can find you. It's reverse engineered, to find the person making that 911 call, and it's just of critical importance. So finally, Mr. President, I'd like to thank county staff. It's been a long, arduous process. It is 2+ years, but we're certainly very pleased with what we see in the text amendment, and we'd like to thank the county staff for its hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. Harriet Quinn.
Good evening, President Reamer, members of the council. I'm Harriet Quinn speaking on behalf of the Montgomery County Civic Federation as chair of the Planning and Land Use Committee. Our association members of the MCCF represent over 100,000 households from civic and homeowners associations across the county. The term small cell to describe this is misleading, as 5G cells are not small in size. Small refers to the short broadcasting range of these cells due to the weakness of the signal. Implementation of 5G will require that these cell facilities be only a couple of 100 feet apart in some places due to the weak signals. They would also require large, noisy, refrigerator-sized equipment boxes up to 20 cubic feet, large enough for a person to stand in. The ZTA proposes locating these a maximum of 30 feet from residences in all detached zones. Some of our member organizations are located in neighborhoods with underground utilities, while others have above-ground utilities, each presenting their own set of issues with regard to installation. During our September 17th general meeting, we reconfirmed our positions from our March 12th, 2018 meeting regarding ZTA 1802 from April, and our September 12th, 2016 meeting regarding ZTA 1605 from 2016. We oppose the elimination of public notice, the elimination of public hearings for these facilities, and we oppose the reduction of setbacks from 60 feet to 30 feet. Other local governments have designed their ordinances with community input and the surrounding environment in mind, including California, New York, Washington, and Illinois. Other local governments treat residential dwellings, schools, and hospitals as sensitive uses, and Montgomery County should as well. During the April 3rd public hearing, we requested that you work with us to craft a better ZTA and that you audit and address the problems with the current approval process. I'll allow you to read the rest of my testimony, but in summary, we respectfully request adding a provision that requires post-installation inspection and certification so that the poles are in the correct place and operating safely. This reform should occur before any additional legislation is adopted. Maintain public notice and public hearings for siting of all wireless transmission facilities. Maintain the setback from residences at 60 feet, and adopt the comprehensive antenna proposal as outlined by Sue President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harriet. Sergio Ortiz.
Hello, my name is Sergio Ortiz, and I live in Germantown. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of ZTA 18-11 this evening. I'm just a normal guy. The only thing I know is that I know nothing. Reasoning merely leads to varying degrees of certainty. So what are we certain of? The only thing we have a high degree of certainty of is that more research is needed. So what do we do in face of uncertainty? Stifle progress? In every stage of human progress, from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural societies, and from agricultural societies to industrial societies, there are some things we've left behind, but there's more we've gained. Nobody can argue against the fact that if it wasn't for the progress brought about by the industrial and agricultural revolution, that we would not be experiencing a higher quality of life and standard of living than any other point in human history. My point is this: we stand to lose more by stifling progress in the face of uncertainty. I respectfully ask that you support ZTA 18-11. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. Donna Barron.
Yes, I'm Donna Barron.
You are, but you're not heard without your mic on.
Heard. How's that? Better? Okay, this summer I met with Joy Nurmi, Executive Assistant to Ike Leggett, and Mitzi Herrera, Cable and Broadband Administrator for the county. During that meeting, Joy repeatedly expressed that Mr. Leggett wants ZTA 1811 approved while he is in office in order to pave the way for 5G cell towers in residential areas. We have lived in our house for 37 years. We considered moving, but our grown children live in the area, so we decided to stay and remodel. We put more money into our house than we originally paid for it because we want to stay there as long as possible. But now our neighborhood is faced with the possibility of 16 cell towers in our front yards as tall as 24 feet with large antennas and large buzzing boxes next to each of them, spewing millimeter wave radiation throughout the neighborhood, our homes, and our bodies. They are dangerous for many reasons, and they could decrease our property values by up to 20%. Mitzi Herrera said that as many as 5,000 5G cell towers could be installed in Montgomery County. That's enough to wreck every neighborhood in the county. However, the need for these cell towers, every 5 to 11 homes or every 500 feet, has been debunked by the former CEO of Verizon, Lowell McAdam, as well as John Godfrey from Samsung. The county's plan, according to them, is based on an outdated myth. They insist that the signal can travel up to 2,000 feet directly to a receiver on the front of a specific house. The technology is changing very rapidly. More importantly, many analysts believe that for those of us who have fiber optic cable, 5G will be nothing more than an improvement in the speed at which we download movies. The analysts have also said that fiber optic cable is a perfectly acceptable solution for residential areas, particularly when there are so many very serious questions being asked about the safety of 5G by the scientific and medical communities. Fortunately, Councilmember Craig Rice told me recently that the County Council fully expects to work with the residents as they did with the commercial areas so we can come up with something that we can all live with. That is good news because rushing forward with residential 5G for any reason is irresponsible, dangerous, and in direct opposition to the Council's job description, which is to protect the health and welfare of the residents. Defeat or defer ZTA 1811, and let's get it right. Work with us.
Thank you, Donna. And now we will have Anthony Faiola.
Yeah, first I want to apologize if I use any technical terms in my little presentation here that you might not understand. Hello, my name is Anthony Faiola, and with my company, Instracom Incorporated, a Maryland corporation located in Montgomery County, 1969, county and state taxpayer. We'll give the attendees some input concerning wireless towers. I have been in the radio wireless engineering business, commercial and military, for over 60 years. I'm also a life member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. Current power companies, such as Baltimore Gas and Electric, are already using RF radio transmitters and receivers on existing poles to read residential and commercial building watt-hour meters. You can see them. You have to look, but you can see them on top of the towers. My opinion is the 5G equipment will share the same poles, and by utilizing the unused additional poles and structures, use of additional new poles and towers are minimized. Multiple physical, close-spaced microcell sites would result in lower effective radiated power, ERP, and would lower perceived health risks. There is no empirical testing suggesting radio frequency power coming from a cell site is harmful. I'm 83 years old. I'm still alive. Okay. First-hand knowledge that the thinking of home devaluation theory is unsubstantiated. I live in the Ashton area. Recently, 3 homes directly adjacent to my property sold in near record time at higher valuation than originally purchased. We have a 197-foot self-supporting radio communications tower located on my property. This tower has been FCC and FAA approved for over 20 years. It has been used as a wireless use 1G through 4G LTE, which is in use today. Used tower for over 35 years. Located in a Montgomery County neighborhood surrounded by modest single-family homes. We are meeting here for the purpose of structure feasibility of meeting the 5G coverage criteria. We are looking at path loss for wideband frequencies and I apologize for this number, in the 3.5 and 6 gigahertz area. Basic physics tells us path loss at these aforementioned frequency bands is very high and gets worse with interfering trees, buildings, and other factors. Therefore, the line of sight, LOS, plays a very important part in the development of a coverage plan with minimal sites versus total coverage. My tower meets these challenges of maximum coverage with minimum small cells. Again, it is located in a mature neighborhood with no complaints from any neighbors. Surveying your coverage map, there are very few coverage locations in my neighborhood where there is 100-foot plus telecommunication tower locations.
Thank you, Mr. Fiola.
Yep.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll read the remainder of it written. Ms. Theodora Scarato.
Actually, Laura Simon.
You were Ms. Scarato. Okay. You're Laura Simon, and you're speaking in her place.
Switch place, because I have to
Proceed.
leave to pick up a child. Yeah.
Fine. There you go.
So, hi everyone, I'm Laura Simon. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not very good with all the nuts and bolts, but I'm here tonight to talk as a mother, a sister, a friend, a neighbor, and someone who cares very deeply about the health of our community. I'm here tonight speaking not for 5Gs. I feel like we have enough in the neighborhood already. I mean, not that we have enough, but we have enough of other types of microwave radiation in the neighborhood already. I feel like we are saturated. I understand that there are hot spots, but as someone spoke about, 5G is not that 5G is not the method to solve that. It's the 4G and 4G. Anyway, so sorry, I'm getting a little lost, a little frazzled. So the FCC has acknowledged that it's time to update the guidelines, and that were set over 2 decades ago. But this has not happened yet. And I feel that there should be a prerequisite before installing small cells. If the FCC has not updated the guidelines, then how can we ensure that human health is protected, and how can we know what is in compliance? I looked up lead on the American Cancer Society website, since like microwave radiation, it is a known neurotoxin and possibly carcinogenic. Although the mounting science for microwave radiation is actually that it should be reclassified as carcinogenic, is what the scientists are saying. The advice was that because lead can cause health problems, even aside from its possible link to cancer, it is important to limit your exposure whenever possible. You can't control everything in life, but that doesn't mean you should throw all caution to the wind. Is anyone here going to go out and buy gallons of lead paint because it is cheap and easy to paint your house and splash it all over the place? Of course not. Why would you take away our right to protect our health with regard to wireless radiation? This is why we live in America, and this is for sure why we live in Montgomery County. Please don't take away our right to act proactively and take care of our families. Let's be sure about what the health implications are before we roll this out and not be bullied by a law that gives someone else the right to endanger our health. Look at the firefighters in California. The firefighters in California received an exemption. You could see how real this issue is. An exemption because of health concerns. Abnormal brain function was found in every firefighter examined. And I'm sure you've heard of the City Council of Mill Valley, a town located just a few miles north of San Francisco, that voted to unanimously block down deployments of small cells to protect the health and safety of the community. Yes, you heard it right. California tech executives do not want this in their backyards, and neither do we. Thank you.
Ms. Simon. And that, all right, Mr. Elrich has a question.
So I wanted to ask Mr. Donahue a question. It's been asserted that Montgomery County has to do this, otherwise we'll be preempted federally. You guys are active nationwide and you have resistance nationwide. So if Montgomery County were to do this, are you going to drop any effort to preempt local governments at the federal level that you're already engaged in, or at the state level?
I'm not
Do we
involved.
matter that much?
I'm not involved in lobbying with the FCC. I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Council President mentioned a vote pending for tomorrow. I'm not involved in those proceedings.
So you can't opine as whether or not Montgomery County is the crux, or whether or not you decide nationally to go forward with preemption legislation. You're waiting on us?
Because I pay attention to what's going on in Annapolis and Richmond and at the FCC, it's a very real possibility that the state or the Fed is going to continue to constrain local authority.
Regardless of what we do?
Yeah.
Just say that.
Yes?
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. So regardless of what we do, whether we say we don't want to do it or we...
We believe that the text amendment that you have before you strikes a very excellent balance. We think it really does the job of protecting where needed and allowing for us to file, go through tower committee, go through hearing as necessary. We think the text amendment really does an excellent job of striking that balance.
I understand you feel. I'm just trying to get to the point, which I think is important, which is it's really not going to stop the efforts to preempt local governments, because there are too many local governments that are already doing this.
Right.
Okay.
So and my other question is, how many are you going to deploy? Because if the issue really is signal density and the inability to communicate, I know Donna's neighborhood, it's not particularly dense. It doesn't strike me as, doesn't have tons of tall apartments and many, many cell phone users. Right. So I guess my question is, if this is the kind of neighborhood that's going to get the towers, isn't this just going to be ubiquitous in the county?
So the towers that are poles that are less than 22 feet will be going through a hearing examiner and hearings. There's been some conversation about batching, but in any event, there'll be a public hearing. There's opportunity to testify and oppose or support. So for those towers and those poles that are in the 22 and less height, they go through the process essentially as it is today.
And if they don't get built, then these neighborhoods will not have adequate cell service.
Well, it's going to be a real challenge. When we looked at the maps early on, we got the question about, why all the small cells in this particular area? Well, when you looked at, I've forgotten, Seneca, I guess it was, there was a large self-support tower in the other portion of the area where providing pretty good coverage. The gentleman mentioned 197 foot, that provides a large footprint. Where those towers don't exist, and where there's no water tank, where there's no BGE or PEPCO transmission towers, the small cells are the solution.
But if you had a 190-foot tower, could you do your 5G service off a 190-foot tower?
So we're really doing both. What we're really trying to do is use the macro sites, but use the small cells to help offload the capacity constraints on the network.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, it wasn't a direct response to me, but I want to just state my view, which is sort of parallel thought here, but different, which is that I think trying to resist doing anything is effectively capitulating to the industry. That's how I see it. And pretending that we can hold this off forever, which, by the way, we wouldn't want to do because we actually want to continue to use our phones the way that we want to use them. But pretending that we could effectively is capitulating to the industry and allowing them to justify preempting us. So that's my view. It's contrary to the previous view expressed. But all right, we'll have the next panel. Richard Rothrock, Valerie Irvin, Matthew Herman, Rick Meyer, Lee Gokman, and Cynthia Bauman. All right. Mr. Rothrock, you may proceed when you're ready.
Good evening, Councilman Reamer and members of the Council. Thank you for allowing me to testify this evening on ZTA 18-11 and the critically important role that small cell can play in Montgomery County. My name is Richard Rothrock, and I am the Government Relations Manager for Crown Castle here in Maryland. As the nation's largest provider of wireless infrastructure, we have a long track record of working with local jurisdictions and municipalities to deploy wireless infrastructure. Right here in Maryland, we have worked closely with jurisdictions throughout the state, including Howard County, the City of Baltimore, and the Town of Ocean City, to deploy wireless small cell networks for the residents, visitors, and businesses in those communities. In fact, we've already deployed over 800 small cell node locations in Maryland, all of which provide service for multiple carriers. Our work with Montgomery County is no different. Over the last 2.5 years, we've worked alongside government officials and the community to find a solution that works for Montgomery County. The passage of the commercial zoning text amendment this spring and the residential zoning text amendment in front of you this evening is a result of the conversations we've had over those last 2 years. In order for the county to continue to position itself as a leader and competitor in the new economy, that entire county, not just commercial areas, will need to be prepared for 5G. ZTA 1811 is an integral piece of that puzzle. If Amazon's RFP taught us anything about economic investment, it's that livability plays a huge role in that puzzle. We know that today, reliable, fast, wireless cell phone service is a large component of a location's livability. And if preparedness for 5G isn't already a component, we know that it will be in the very near future. This means building a small cell network where residents live, in addition to where they work, eat, and play, is critical to Montgomery County's plan for the future. But this just isn't about economic development. It's also about public safety. Today, 80% of 911 calls originate from wireless devices. Small cell technology will give police, firefighters, and other first responders access to the information they need, like the ability to accurately and quickly locate where the call is placed, allowing first responders to send the right jurisdiction's personnel. When we build out a network designed to address wireless service in residential zones, we follow rigorous process for identifying proposed node locations. Proposed deployments on smaller neighborhood roads are truly a last resort. In fact, due to this intricate location identification process, only 18% of our proposed small cell nodes today are in neighborhoods with underground utilities and poles shorter than the 20 feet. And as you know, the ZTA would require a conditional use process for deployments proposed in smaller neighborhood roads with underground utilities and shorter steel light poles. On behalf of Crown Castle, our employees, contractors, and the hundreds of thousands of Marylanders who rely every day on the networks we build, I encourage you to take the next step in preparing for the future and support ZTA 18-11.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rothrock. I don't see Valerie Irvin. Matthew Herman.
Thank you. Thank you, President Reamer, and council members. Thanks for the chance to testify here. I'm here in support of ZTA 1811. I think it strikes the appropriate balance between protecting the look and feel and concerns of our local community with a somewhat expedited process to ensure that small cell is deployed to improve broadband capability here in the county. Again, I think it is the right balance. It strikes that perfect balance, quite frankly. There's been a little bit of discussion about 5G. 5G, we are in a competition globally, particularly with China and South Korea for the deployment of 5G. And for the first time in a long time, the United States could be a leader in 5G. And it's easy to talk about, but we don't really quite grasp how much better that technology is than the 4G technology that we have now. It's not just faster, it's much more widespread, as other people have testified to. We want to continue to be a leader in 5G, and I want Montgomery County to benefit from it. I've had many interactions with the telecommunications industry, and the pattern is very consistent. If you do not have enabling legislation or regulations that are permissive enough to deploy small cell, they're going to go somewhere else. And we see that right now at the Department of Defense. The Navy has the most permissive policy that is consistent with industry standards, but protects the local base or local installation concerns. You go to the other side, the Army has a very opposite policy. So where's the money going? The money is going to Navy and Marine Corps bases. You're going to have Navy and Marine Corps bases across this country with 5G before you see it at any Army installation. And as a federal taxpayer, you're going to end up footing the bill at Army installations. That's just the way the system works. And you take that down to a local level, that's exactly what's going on here. If we don't have enabling legislation, you're going to see that money and investment that the telecom industry is willing to put forward on a local level to other places in this region and, quite frankly, other places in this country. But 5G is a real thing. And we need small cell. It's an enabler. It's one of the enablers. There's other things that need to happen too. But it's a critical enabler out there. And I also want to make a comment about the health effects. I understand the concerns that a lot of residents have already talked about and will talk about more. But President Reamer hit it square. This is with the FCC. And I think take that passion, take that action, and force the FCC to finish their 2013 regulation. And as a former Hill staffer, I'd be glad to give you a lot of ideas on how to get creative to force the FCC to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Rick Meyer.
I am Rick Meyer with the Montgomery County Coalition for the Control of Cell Towers, mc4t.org. Many communities require notice provisions, particularly for cell poles constructed in residential zones. These rules are intended to engage the community to help local governments prevent mistakes and keep applicants within the scope and the scale of their permits. Not so in Montgomery County, where for 7 years since small cells were first introduced, residents have been totally locked out of review and permitting processes, no notice, no input. And because we're purposely kept in the dark by the Tower Committee, the public must rely exclusively on an overworked and understaffed Department of Permitting Services to prevent construction mistakes on wireless attachments to utility poles in the rights of way. In my testimony in April, I summarized MC4T's physical inventory of more than 50 cell poles around the county. We found that more than half of these small cell facilities were non-conforming to the Tower Committee recommendations: too tall, inside minimum setbacks, oversized with too many antennas, installed without conditional use hearings, and even installed in the wrong poles at the wrong addresses. You'll hear more from that tonight from Vicki Ho. Many of these cell poles have multiple non-conformance issues. How is that possible? Well, to the specific questions by Mr. Lementhal and Mr. Ehrlich a few minutes ago, this summer we finally got our answer. County staff prepared an unsigned ZTA 1811 frequently asked questions document, and it includes an extraordinary paragraph about DPS. That document states very clearly that previously DPS performed no, and I repeat the word no, zoning reviews on cell poles and public rights of way. And further, the FAQ explained that there has been absolutely zero interdepartmental coordination to match up Tower Committee recommendations with the scope and scale of permits issued by DPS. So for the last 7 years, the actions of the Tower Committee have been irrelevant to the actions of DPS. This is an unbelievable Rip Van Winkle moment. DPS has suddenly awoken and is reportedly changing their procedures to perform inspections going forward. And what about those dozens of poles identified in our inventory? Well, they're still there, and we don't have a single instance to report to you of any enforcement action or any planned enforcement action. This must stop. Please work with us, engage with us. We have so much information to share. We have so much to learn from other communities. Appoint a citizens task force and adopt a fully comprehensive zoning proposal, not duct tape and chewing gum ZTAs that pop up every 6 months. Vote no. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Certainly want to compliment you and the work of your group for identifying those mistakes. I think you've really brought something important to this conversation, so thank you. And we will continue to work on that. We've talked about it at committee, and we're going to continue to. Lee Gauckman.
Good evening, Council President Reamer and members of the County Council. My name is Lee Gotchman, and I'm an active voter and community organizer who lives and works in Bethesda. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of ZTA 1811, which will govern the deployment of small cell antennas in residential areas throughout Montgomery County. I believe that it's essential for all of the county's residential areas to be equipped with the latest and greatest technology. As a proud member of the millennial generation, I value strong data connectivity. Millennials not only own the most mobile devices, but we're also most likely to take advantage of all the functions offered by these devices, such as sending emails, streaming videos, listening to music, browsing social media, and using web mapping applications. We rely on data from wireless devices to conduct our day-to-day work, so it's critical that we have reliable wireless service in all parts of the county, including our neighborhoods. This deployment is especially important for us if we want to attract young professionals to settle down in this great county. My roommate is a software developer, and he's a perfect example of a hardworking young professional who wants to live and stay in this county, but needs access to the most up-to-date technology at home to get the job done. To me, this isn't about politics. This is about common sense. When we increase access to faster data speeds and better wireless coverage, we put people in the driver's seat. Everyone deserves the chance to chart their own course in life, especially young professionals. At the end of the day, millennials need to know that the county has their back and that they're doing everything they can to put us in a position to succeed. Small cell technology will do just that and give us better wireless services and faster data speeds, which will transform our quality of life. I'm sure of it. This is the future. We are the future, and it's time for Montgomery County to step up to the plate and deploy this technology. Thank you for your time, and I respectfully ask that you support ZTA 1811.
Thank you, Mr. Gotchman. Cynthia Baumann.
My name is Cindy Bachman. I am a resident of Potomac, Maryland. Please vote no on this amendment because it fails to hold the wireless industry accountable for the risks posed by their actions. Facts do matter. Please consider these. Number one, no need for cell towers near homes. Verizon's CEO said as recently as this June that millimeter waves from small cells travel further than originally expected, and towers, rather than being 200 feet apart, could be more like 3,000 feet apart. Number two, the industry and their lawyers consider adverse health effects of their technology on their bottom line. While you say you may not consider this for zoning purposes, please understand that the wireless companies absolutely do consider and document the potential health risks relating to radio frequency radiation, including certain cancers, in their publicly filed documents. Number three, and T-Mobile made this point in their presentation, since 1997, the Tower Committee has approved 99.4% of the 3,451 applications it has received. So either this is the most efficient committee, the applications were perfect when they were received, or perhaps there are insufficient resources, capacity, or knowledge to complete a thoughtful review of the applications, and that is why they go through. Number four, the Tower Committee approved 3 years ago a cell tower 15 to 20 feet from a school's outdoor play area where children as young as 2 play, and incidentally this school has a no cell phone zone policy. The school, like others in the community, had no notice of the cell tower. They didn't recognize this new type of structure as being a cell tower. This application was part of a batch of 15 submitted by Crown Castle and Verizon. In 2015, it was approved in 45 days, and it operated to place 7 cell towers in a 1.5-mile stretch of Travilla Road. In this application, which was over 150 pages, there was no mention of a school or proximity to homes. The property also was described in the application simply as small cell on existing wood pole. The minutes did not mention schools, children, homes, nor reflect any community participation. Number 5, the Maryland Constitution says that persons should have remedies for injuries to themselves or property without denial or delay. There is no remedy I am aware of for a mistakenly placed cell tower, nor is there a record I am aware of where they have been corrected. This means there is no remedy for property value loss. Is the council okay with the Tower Committee being unaccountable and providing residents with no solutions?
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Bachman.
you.
Thank you. All right. That concludes this panel. Appreciate your participation. Amelia Siriani, Susanna Goldman, Kim Barry, Marion Eady, Ricardo Loaiza, Anita Prince. Ms. Siriani? If you'll press the button at the base of the microphone. There you go. You may proceed.
Good evening. My name is Amelia Siriani, and I'm speaking this evening in support of CTA 1811. I'm 26 years old, and like many people my age, I live with my parents. I work from home, and I need strong connectivity to do my work, which is not what I get at my parents' house. I know some people feel like we don't need better wireless service in neighborhoods because they use Wi-Fi in their house. However, in my home, there are times when the Wi-Fi signal simply isn't strong enough, and that's when I have to switch to using data. I'm sure I'm not the only person who has this issue as well. Ultimately, I just need to be sure that I have a strong data coverage at all times because it serves as my backup system. I've also started to look for a place to live on my own, and one of the major factors in my decision is my reliable access to data. If Montgomery County does not pass this legislation, I will need to consider moving to another county such as Washington, D.C., where they started to roll out small cell technology. I'm an avid runner, and I enjoy running in my neighborhood. There have been countless numbers of times when I've had trouble accessing my workout applications while I'm running. By installing small cell antennas, we could be resolving these issues and allowing users like me to
cell tower antennas on the utility poles. No notice to our community, no hearing, just come home from work, and there it is, 30 feet from our houses. Since ZTA 1802 was introduced last winter, I and others have been researching on how other jurisdictions are handling the deployment of small cell infrastructure. Communities across the country are facing all the same threats as Montgomery County. We face this threat of state preemption, and we face looming, ever-encroaching FCC attempts to restrict local wireless siting authority. And yet, communities are responding differently. In Doylestown, Pennsylvania, the community was able to deploy small cell poles in a manner that satisfied both the community and the law. They faced litigation by Crown Castle, but they won. In Petaluma, California, 200-foot setbacks were instituted to protect residential areas. In Gaithersburg, a collaborative solution was created which protects residential areas. In Prince George's County, there is always community notice and a hearing for every proposed cell tower site. So I believe that here in Montgomery County, we can comply with existing law, but allow deployment in a manner that makes sense. Simply allowing small cell deployment will not bridge the digital divide either. It may make it worse. Carriers will only roll out new 5G wireless in those parts of the county where it makes economic sense for them to do so. 5G requires fiber optic cable underground and heavy infrastructure deployment. These will be the same areas that already have good wireless service and also wired fast broadband-like services like Verizon Fios and upgraded Comcast internet access. So we should be asking questions like, where are the areas that are underserved? How do we induce or compel carriers to deliver wired and wireless services if they don't want to? How do we bring fiber to the door in every household so that all residents have access to secure, high-speed internet? Wired internet is the most secure and the fastest, and it enables both wired and wireless devices. In New York City, in a real effort to conquer the digital divide, the city took Verizon to court for failing to deliver on its 2008 franchise agreement to bring fiber to all residents to the door. Verizon had been allowed to charge fees for this massive fiber build-out, but it did not deliver to all residents who needed it and to whom it was promised. Hopefully with this lawsuit, all residents, including underserved residents, will have access to fast, secure broadband. Montgomery County should develop a comprehensive solution, and this is only a partial solution, which I oppose.
All right. Thank you. Kim Berry. You'll press the button at the base. There you go.
Hello, my name is Kim Barry, and I'm a resident of Montgomery County. It is my pleasure to be here tonight and to offer my support for Zoning Text Amendment 18-11. I believe this measure is a step towards improving our community's ability to protect the public safety, and I hope that the Council will approve it. The proposed amendment will enact changes that makes it easier to develop cutting-edge wireless networks in Montgomery County, with a boost in small cell build-out. 5G will be running in our communities far sooner than if we leave the current state unaddressed. 5G will be over 20 times faster than our current network speeds. That means victims of crime will be able to report incidents and authorities will be able to arrive on the scene much faster. That's important given that around 80% of 911 calls come from cell phones, and a mere minute improvement in response time can substantially improve the mortality rate of victims of violent crimes. Studies also offer insight into how modern wireless networks can reduce crime. Communities will be able to leverage the instantaneous connections offered by 5G to provide real-time video to first responders. With video surveillance integration, criminals and victims will be identified faster and criminals brought to justice. These are just some of the improvements that would occur by welcoming 5G. Of course, there are many others, but in terms of making Montgomery County a safer place to live, the Council can take a concrete step by providing this amendment and continuing to foster an environment that allows the advancement of 5G. I hope that you will see the benefits of ZTA 18-11 and vote in its favor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Marion 80. You'll press the button at the base of your mic. Yep.
My name is Marion Eady. I'm the founder of the League of Conservation Voters. Not long ago, you passed a resolution declaring we face a climate emergency. If you really mean that, you should not pass this zoning text amendment in the form that it has today. We can build plenty more cell towers in Montgomery County. The industry wants this, to rush this through, to blanket our neighborhoods with cell phone towers so they can abandon their wired and fiber optic networks. They would rather lay off those maintenance workers and let our energy consumption skyrocket. A study reported in the Institute of Electronic and Electronics Engineers said, quote, wireless technologies will continue to consume at least 10 times more power than wired technologies when providing comparable access rates and traffic volumes. That's a bigger deal than it seems, because a snapshot of today is not a good guide to tomorrow on energy consumption. Demand from all Internet devices is increasing by 20% every year. We face a tsunami of data. Internet of Things, robots, surveillance, driving cars, live streaming videos, and ever more trivial applications offered by an industry eager to create new products and market. A study by Swedish energy expert Anders André concluded the communications technology could consume about 20% of all electricity by 2025 and be responsible for 14% of global greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. We owe it to the climate to make data transmission as efficient as we possibly can. This zoning text amendment takes us in the opposite direction if it enables the abandonment of much more efficient wired connections, which is why the Sierra Club has urged you to hold off on passing any ordinance like this until you have thoroughly assessed its energy implications. These cell phone towers will threaten pollinators and migratory birds which use the Earth's electromagnetic fields for orientation and navigation. We all know bees are in dire trouble. Many studies suggest that EMFs are part of that problem. If you put a cell phone near a hive, the bees abandon it. I now have a yard humming with life from a hive and many native plants. If you put a cell phone next to my house, my yard will become a dead place. I know you're afraid of federal preemption, but that is not an excuse to roll over and play dead. The feds can preempt a moratorium, but we are only asking for reasonable zoning requirements and for you to work with us to reduce our risk. If you get sued, at least we will know you tried, and you can buy us valuable time. If you roll over and play dead, that tells us you are not really working for us, the citizens. You're working for the telecom industry.
Ms. Eady, I appreciate your tremendous career and working to found LCV, and I would urge you to look up Montgomery County v. FCC. It's when we sued the FCC over their attempts to preempt us on telecom infrastructure.
I think that's great, but where the rubber meets the road is what kind of legislation you pass now and whether you rush it through or you do it right.
I will thank you for being here tonight. Much appreciated. Ricardo Loaiza.
Good evening, Council President, Council members. My name is Ricardo Loaiza, and I'm a Montgomery County resident from Silver Spring, from the Woodside Forest area, for 23 years. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight on CTA 18-11. This amendment will begin to position Montgomery County for the latest and greatest of cellular technologies, and I encourage the Council to vote in favor of this proposal. If Montgomery County is to be a hub for forward-thinking innovation, as I would like it to be, it must first have the necessary digital infrastructure to make that kind of activity possible. By welcoming the deployment of small cells, our neighborhoods can move to the front of the line for the latest cell networks, which is something that must be done to enable the functionality of next-generation technology. The adoption of 5G is not a question of if, but when. Passing this amendment will accelerate 5G deployment in Montgomery County and enable us to lead in this coming era. By being among the first to offer unprecedented network speeds and capacity, we would be able to attract trailblazing companies. This amendment is one step toward making Montgomery County a leader in technology. It will be impossible to take on such a role as competing localities surpasses in the ability to offer the best available networks. Keeping the future of technological developments in our county in mind, I hope to see the Council approve the CTA amendment and seek additional ways to encourage small cells deployment. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, sir. Anita Prince.
My name is Anita Prince. I'm a county resident and teacher. I vehemently oppose this zoning legislation that would allow small cell towers emitting powerful millimeter wave radiation to be placed on telephone poles throughout my neighborhood. 3 minutes. That's how long scientists tell us it takes wireless radiation from a cell phone to alter your brain cells and damage your brain's protective blood-brain barrier. It is totally reckless and irresponsible to encase our community 24/7 with 5G wireless radiation and to exponentially increase exposure when it is becoming more and more evident that this technology, as dazzling as it may be, has a deadly flip side. John McCain and Beau Biden were casualties, and this technology is causing a lot of the 911 emergency calls. Mounting scientific research is linking EMF radiation exposure to parallel exponential increases in brain cancers, depression, and suicide, insomnia, ADHD. This situation with wireless radiation is akin to X-ray radiation, which was also thought to be totally safe. Dangerous X-ray machines were everywhere. But now we are beginning to see the truth. Powerful telecom companies are using denial, deception techniques, and legal bullying to keep this problem hidden. But there are 11 countries, including France, Israel, China, yes, China, and Russia, that are scaling back wireless radiation exposure to protect their citizens. I urge the Council to make a decision for the long range that will benefit and protect our citizens, especially our children. Slightly faster downloads can hardly justify a risky, massive alteration of our neighborhood structures. I ask you to join with other counties that have successfully rejected this 5G on aesthetic grounds, Palm Beach, Florida, worker grounds, California firefighters. We must take back our basic human rights to protect ourselves from corporate encroachment.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Prince. Just wanted to remark, we are indeed part of a lawsuit of local governments coalescing to sue the FCC over their current actions. The next panel, Carmen Ortiz Larson, Daniel Kaiser, Lauren Milone, Edward Myers, Laura Simon, Carol Falk. Ms. Larson, you may proceed when you're ready. But you'll need to press the button at the base. There you go.
Yeah? Okay. Thank you, President Reamer and County Council members. My name is Carmen Ortiz Larson. I'm a resident of Montgomery County, have been since I was 16 years old, a few years ago. And I also am the president of Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County. And I'm also a baby boomer, so that kind of sort of sums it up. I guess I'm a scientist by education, but over the last 30, 40, 50 years, I've been working with folks, especially the last 20 years, I've been working with some of our less underserved, our underserved communities, really. And in reference to this particular bill that's being considered by the County Council, and it's being proposed, I would say that I have received a number of calls from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the constituency from the foundation. Its foundation reaches out to not just entrepreneurs and business owners, but also the community at large. We have a number of single-family moms, stay-at-home moms that are working from home and have a hard time doing so from lack of connectivity and lack of access to better cellular connection and better connectivity all around, I mean, including fiber. But also, there were concerns about people with disability. We have a program for people with disability, and many of those folks need to be working from home in order to be able to earn a living, especially physically disabled that can't get around. And so I think a lot of times it's easy. As a baby boomer, I mentioned that because, you know, I heard so much today that makes sense, but we all have our cell phones, and we all, you know, I try to use a headset, but we all keep them close to us. I think we should ban cell phones after hearing everything today. We really, you know, because we should ban them, right? But I think we should also ban navigators and other energy intense things. I'm here today, I'm going to focus on this ZTA 1811. I believe we really need to have ZTA 1811 because, and I would like you to consider it, and I strongly support it, as some of my colleagues have mentioned, we need to be able to have the kinds of school systems that we have had, where we have the best education in the state, and I think that the new technology and better access to cell communication is going to give us that. It's going to be safer for people and allow people to work from home and reduce the traffic also from people who are telecommuting and working from home. Thank you.
Thank you. You got some applause there for your line that we ought to ban cell phones.
Yeah.
Daniel Kaiser.
Yeah.
Hello. My name is Daniel Kaiser. I live in Montgomery County. I'm against the ZTA amendment as it is. You probably heard a lot of stories from the industry, from people that live in Montgomery County, how they have no reception at home, or there's a necessity for 5G for 911 enhancements. I think the industry needs to fix the dead spots that are already existing in the neighborhoods. We have Verizon Fios deployment in Montgomery County, I believe, is over 92%. And I'm pretty sure probably 95% of the people in here are using wireless from home. I mean, they're not on the road trying to, you know, look at stuff or do things. A little nervous there, sorry. I mean, I'm for 5G deployment in commercial settings. I don't think a lot of people have any issues with that, the residential. I think the main thing is just having it in the residential neighborhoods. Guess you're exposed to the radio frequencies 24/7. We have kids at home. We have people that stay home and work. I think majority of the people have FiOS, Comcast already deployed in their environment, and I'm pretty sure in-home wireless from their Wi-Fi connected to fiber or connected to Comcast is going to be a lot more reliable than 5G located in front of someone else's house or in front of their house. As Donna mentioned, there's a possibility of 5,000 plus small cell towers deployments in Montgomery County. That's just maybe saying from Crown Castle or local carriers. But what happens if Amazon wants to get in the wireless industry or Google? And what happens if they want to put up their towers? They're going to go through a basic hearing. I mean, how is it going to be vetted? I guess, what's the limit on density of these cell towers from multiple different companies, new startup companies? I know the distance is I think the distance for 5G is 200 to 500 feet. Someone said possibly 3,000 feet. But as for the density besides co-location, I mean, I think that could be an issue. If you open up this box, I mean, everybody's going to try to get a piece of the pie, I would say. And that's pretty much it. My concern is just really just the proliferation of these small cell towers in the environment, in our neighborhoods. I mean, commercial, I think everybody's fine for commercial. You want to put it down Great Seneca Highway, I think that's fair, but in residentials, at that density, I think it's a big issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Lauren Malone. Ed Myers.
Thank you. My name is Ed Myers. I'm a resident of North Potomac. Assuming the FCC votes out its proposed order tomorrow, it behooves the Council to revisit the ZTA to ensure to the best of its ability that the ZTA is revised as necessary to maximize the authority left to it and is consistent with the FCC's order. I hesitate to recommend this because, as an attorney presently challenging the FCC in the D.C. Circuit, I believe that this new FCC order also should be reversed or remanded on appeal. But putting that aside, we have to live with it. It's the current world we live in. I want to point out one important new development in the FCC's new order. That is the requirement that local agencies set out an express written policy on how aesthetic considerations, quality of life considerations, that is, will be addressed. Under the FCC's new order, any action by the local government that takes into account aesthetic factors without basing it on a pre-existing written agency policy will be deemed unlawful. I don't know that the ZTA contains such a policy, but it should. I also want to echo the need for post-installation inspections of the health effects and the radiation emitted by the so-called small cell facilities. While the 96 Telecom Act preempted the authority of the Council to consider safety and health prior to acting on applications, preemption only applies to the extent safety regulations are not being violated. Accordingly, the Council has the authority to require post-installation safety reviews conducted on a regular basis, say annually, after deployment. That should be in the ZTA if it isn't already. I also recommend to your attention the changes described in Sue President's testimony. She has more specific recommendations that I think are worth your attention. Finally, I sit here and listen to a lot of the hype about the transformative impacts that this new technology will provide. But the real problem is that it is reasonable to worry about the high-frequency radiation from this new technology. The standards that the FCC currently has in effect were imposed in 1996 based on 1992 science, far before anybody was thinking about a 5G high-frequency technology. In 2012, the Government Accountability Office said the FCC standards are out of date and may be inadequate. The FCC still hasn't acted on its 2013 proceeding and should be recommended that it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Myers. Good points. The county has definitely urged the FCC to update those RF emissions in that study. Theodora Scarato.
Hi. Theodora Scarato. I'm Executive Director with Environmental Health Trust, and we're working on this issue nationally and internationally. I think, speaking of millennials that were discussed, millennials are entirely unaware that the technology they love could harm their future ability to have children, could damage their memory, and could cause brain cancer. Contrary to assumptions that the radiation is low, be aware that industry has stated publicly in presentations that the radiation increases into communities from a fully deployed 5G network would exceed several countries' current radiation limits. The U.S. has among the highest allowable radiation limits, in the world. Why? Because, as was stated 22 years ago, the EPA was actually defunded from researching and setting proper safety standards that protect us from biological effects and instead adopted radiation limits by industry-filled groups based on outdated science. And as a recent Harvard investigation documents, our agencies are captured at the highest levels, with a revolving door between FCC leadership and wireless executives. Our regulatory system is broken, and that is why governments need to act at every level of government, not just with addressing the FCC. Cellular radiation is a new, rapidly increasing form of environmental pollution, and numerous peer-reviewed studies have shown effects from low levels, quote unquote, of this radiation, which are below FCC limits. The CDC just released findings of increased rates of brain, liver, and thyroid cancer among those under 20 in the United States. And replicated research has shown that this radiation can promote cancer growth when in combination with other toxic exposures. Hundreds of scientists have issued an appeal for urgent action to halt 5G because of this science showing effects below government limits. I just want to point out, as was stated earlier about the firefighters, there was neurological damage shown in the firefighters, which is how they got the exemption from the California streamlining bill. This issue cannot be put aside as go to the FCC. We need to take action now to protect communities. Yes. I also want to add that the public needs to be informed, because when they know, they will demand safe technology. And I would ask the Council to develop new protective zoning and to a campaign to increase awareness among the public. You can do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Falk.
Good evening. My name is Carol Falk, a 30-plus year resident of Montgomery County, and I'm here on behalf of the West Montgomery County Citizens Association. We are thousands strong, and we are fighting ZTA 1811 that would change zoning laws to allow private companies to stack 5G wireless system antennas on utility poles and buildings near our houses and schools without our agreement or consent. Additionally, these 5G wireless systems are unsightly and are proven to negatively impact property values because most people do not wish to live in close proximity to them, not only because they are unsightly, but because the radiation emanating from these towers can pose a serious health risk to residents, especially to children, which you should be concerned about, according to many experts in the scientific community. Over 240 scientists and doctors from 41 nations have appealed to the United Nations to reduce wireless exposure to people. On September 13, 2017, 180 scientists submitted a declaration to the European Commission calling for a moratorium on 5G cell antennas due to health risks. On September 19, 2017, Dr. Leonard Hardel, a senior consultant to the Department of Oncology at University Hospital in Örebro, Sweden, Martin Blank, a retired doctor with the Department of Physiology at Columbia University, and more than a dozen other American scientists, doctors, and professors wrote a letter to California Governor Jerry Brown pleading with him to veto legislation allowing more new cell towers, arguing there is a substantial body of evidence that this technology is harmful to humans and the environment. They said the 5G millimeter wave is known to heat the eyes, skin, and testes, and the ubiquitous placement of these towers will expose California's population 24/7. Many towers have already been installed without the consent or knowledge of Montgomery County residents. In some cases, they're as close as 20 feet to a homeowner's front door. I realize that some people want the latest and greatest 5G wireless phones that are coming. They want to view movies and videos on demand via their cell phones with a few seconds of clicking on a link or a website. But you should also realize that there are many, many of us in this community who do not want or need to view the latest video game gone viral on social media or blockbuster Hollywood drama on our phones. For normal work capacity needs, today's phones can transmit nearly unlimited data. I personally know at least 20 or at least a dozen people who work in the technology sector and who do not feel they need to own the latest iPhones. They don't want to pay $1,000 to have the A12 Bionic chip for better picture taking in dark bars, the quad LED True Tone flash, or the next generation neural engine, or the 6.5-inch screen. So just to sum it up, I strongly advise you to oppose ETA 1811. Allow Montgomery citizens the right to say no to these towers. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. You jarred me out of checking my phone. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for your participation. Appreciate your comments. And council members tend to want to hear from the community at these hearings. So that may be why you don't hear questions typically asked. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Karen DeHaven. Our next panel, I should say. Karen DeHaven, Anna Pritchard, Lisa Klein, Stefan Rossetti, Vivek Kulkarni, Sarah Lizzie Timlin, Victoria Georgi. Okay, Karen DeHaven. Press the button and proceed.
Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak on ZTA 1811. I understand the amendment addresses approval standards for telecommunication towers, not 5G health issues per se. However, health concerns are an integral part of any wireless communication, despite claims to the contrary, and cannot be separated from this amendment. While it's not the Council's role per the amendment to offer an official voice on 5G safety, it's incumbent upon you to take health concerns into consideration in addressing zoning issues. My main reason in testifying is to advocate for a dear friend unable to attend herself precisely due to ill health caused by EMF emission from cell phone towers. There is a cell tower at the end of her street, 0.4 miles from her home, 2,112 feet, 70 times the 30-foot setback proposal. At said distance, the radiation from this tower precludes her from taking walks. Among many effects, radiation exacerbates Lyme symptoms. It's extremely distressing to watch her health deteriorate, equally frustrating to see the difficulty in finding areas with limited EMF exposure as a safe place to live. With the advent of 5G, the ubiquitous presence of cell towers, and the exponential increase in non-ionizing radiation emitted, how will she, and the growing number like her, find safe places to live? The wireless industry should not be allowed to push its product on the public without consent. Wireless technology is not just a product, it's a product whose safety is in question. I quote an investigative article on the wireless industry published in The Nation. The scientific evidence that cell phones and wireless technologies in general can cause cancer and genetic damage is not definitive, but it is abundant and has been increasing over time. Contrary to the impression that most news coverage has given the public, 90% of the 200 existing studies included in NIH's PubMed database on the oxidative effects of wireless radiation have found a significant impact. 72% of neurological studies, 64% of DNA studies have also found effects. We cannot push aside these studies. We cannot disregard the signed petition of over 200 scientists and doctors from 35 countries calling for a moratorium on the rollout of 5G. I implore the Council to not jump to the conclusion that it's okay to roll out 5G. Do not take the industry's perspective, hook, line, and sinker. You cannot say it's okay because, in fact, it's not been proven safely. The overriding question is not on zoning. Rather, why are we even considering placement of towers when the safety of these towers and the radiation they emit is still in question? Why are you putting the cart before the horse? By continuing down this path, you're rolling the dice on the public's health. You're forcing county residents, like my friend, to move from their homes, EMF refugees with no place to live or means to support themselves. This is unacceptable.
Thank you, Karen. Anna Pritchard. No? Anna Pritchard? All right. Lisa Klein? No? Oh, okay. Anna.
Hello, council members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I am a retired registered nurse. I was a registered nurse for 35 years. I'm currently a certified nutritional consultant, and I'm very concerned about the health of everyone involved. I've seen a lot of suffering in my career, and I don't like to see suffering. I'm hoping to help relieve suffering in my community. I am reading this article for Mr. Ankar Jain, who couldn't be here tonight. He holds a degree in electrical engineering, and for the last 12 years he has worked in the field of telecommunications, including wireless and 5G technology. For each of these statements that I will make, have a credible case studies that is done at a respectable university. 5G millimeter waves affect humans, animals, and plants due to their very high frequency. Human skin absorbs these very short 5 millimeter waves, which penetrate the skin and break up the DNA helix in bodies of living organisms, disrupt cellular metabolism, and generate stress proteins, which cause many diseases, including cancer. Thousands of studies have shown this. The World Health Organization and the National Toxicology Program concluded that the radiofrequency radiation of the type we currently use with our cell phones can cause cancer. With 5G technology, we are going to be bombarded by much higher frequencies at low short-range intensities, creating a yet more complicated, denser soup of electrosmog that exists now. Effects of microwave millimeter waves. 1. Effects on our skin. 2 studies show that microwave millimeter waves penetrate the skin, causing the possibility of more skin diseases and skin cancer and physical pain to our skin. 2. Effects on our eyes. 3 university studies showed the development of cataracts and other damage to the eye following exposure to millimeter waves. 3. Effects on our heart. 2 studies showed the occurrence of arrhythmias and changes in heart rate, pointing to stress from the heart from exposure, stress on the heart from the exposure of millimeter waves. Effects on the immune system. After exposure to millimeter waves, profound effects on the cells of the immune system were seen, suggesting decreased immune system ability to fight infections. Effects on bacteria resistance. The same study showed that millimeter waves altered bacteria's sensitivity to antibiotics and leading to more antibiotic resistance. The 5 millimeter waves are a threat to plant health as they will damage their cells, lower their nutrient levels, and threaten our food supply. 5 millimeter waves also negatively affect the bees. They alter the bees' sense of navigation, and therefore they cannot find their way home, which affects their ability to pollinate fruits and vegetables. The long-term consequences of this can affect our food supply. And very importantly, most 5G studies are misleading. Research shows...
Thank you. Thank you. We'll read the rest of your testimony.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Lisa.
I can read the rest of my
No,
sentence?
no. We all read the rest of your
Okay.
testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Lisa Klein. No. Stefan Rossetti? Vivek Kulkarni? All right. Sarah Timlin? All right. Very good.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Lizzie Timlin. I live in Kensington, and I moved to Montgomery County when I was 2. First, I wanted to thank you guys. I came here thinking I was like Mr. Smith going to Rockville, and I didn't realize what a complicated issue this was. And rock and a hard place, this is a super hard thing.
You got it.
My youngest brother died of glioblastoma multiforme in 2016. Right above he's right-handed, right above the ear where he survived about 14 months, which is the average. It was a horrible, horrible way to die. He left a widow and 2 teenage children going to BCC. So it's a very real issue. I understand it's not like you get it as soon as you use a phone. It increases your likelihood, and I'm firmly convinced that might have played a part in his death. But you were asking, just listening to all this, I don't feel as though it's quite ready to roll out what you have there. Some of the issues that concern me are the public transparency and comment. I don't really know that I'm completely familiar with the way the zoning text amendment is structured right now, but it sounds that that's a concern. Also, DPS enforcement sounds like, that should be happening prior to, like you said, putting more regulations out there that they're supposedly going to enforce. It also seems to me as you have a lot of experts here, both on the industry side and in the citizenry side, that could allow you to determine what kind of coverage we actually do need, because business will always push for more and more and more. The more you sell, the more money you make. And I understand that. But also we have young people here that are saying it's their livelihoods. I own a cell phone, but I take a lot of precautions now that I understand what the effects are. Also, I compliment you for working with other communities that are facing this issue. Finally, I would suggest, whether we go with 5G or not, even with 4G, education and outreach efforts with our youth especially, but with everyone across the board, to understand what the health effects of this technology are and how they're going to begin to impact in a serious way affecting the health of people who live in the county. Really instructing people things that you can do, either Bluetooth or wired headsets, turning off the Wi-Fi in your house at night. We use a timer. There's a whole lot of things that you can do, and a lot of expertise in this room of people. I bet everyone here owns a cell phone, and thank you very much for everything you're doing.
Thank you for that testimony. Much appreciated. Victoria.
Yes, good evening to the board. And just listening to what I've heard tonight and some of the studies that I've done, I wonder, because it says basically that we have one of the highest limits, set one of the highest limits for EMFs in the world, yet we're behind in technology. Something's not rhyming. But what I'd like to say for the record, obviously, is that I am opposed to ZTA. There's substantial evidence that supports the fact that living organisms such as humans, plants, animals, insects have been and continue to be impacted by the harmful effects of EMFs. It is important that we understand this, since the frequency levels referred to in a 2012 report are substantially lower than the levels that will be bombarding our communities once this program is deployed. The 2012 Bio-Initiative report, which I've given a copy to each one of the council members, it's a summary, is titled A Rationale for Biologically Based Exposure Standards for Low-Intensity Electromagnetic Radiation. So those who sit around and say there's no real evidence, this right here is the golden nugget. It is a comprehensive report prepared by 29 authors from 10 countries, a working group consisting of scientists, researchers, and public health and public policy experts. The strength of this well-respected report
is that it has been done independent of governments, existing bodies, and industry professional societies that have clung to old standards. Therefore, this report, quote, presents a solid scientific and public health policy assessment that is evidence-based, end quote. 1,800 new studies were documented between the initial report in 2007 and the subsequent 2012 edition. Within these studies, effects were reported of exposure levels 10 to hundreds or thousands of times lower than allowed under safety limits in most countries of the world. I would like to briefly address several of the evidenced issues listed under the summary of the science section. Concerns have been identified with regards to the allowable EMF levels discussed in the report. The summary, part of a more than 1,500-page document, provides this crucial beneficial information in a condensed format. The level of frequency emitted by 5G will be approximately 6 to 100 gigahertz or higher. Therefore, the evidence shown should be a grave reminder that we'll see increased incidences of these previously noted findings. So this is the evidence of some of the effects from which comes from the summary. Evidence to damage of sperm and reproduction for fetal and neonatal effects, on effects of autism, electrohypersensitivity, which is often misdiagnosed as a mental disorder, effects from cell tower levels, RFR exposure, for effects on the blood-brain barrier, and many of the others you've heard tonight. So it's very important that we...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've been joined by Lisa Klein.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Klein. Thanks for hearing everybody out tonight. I'm sure I'm going to repeat. I'm not going to repeat what a lot of people have said about kids and health and cell towers. Kids are my thing. They're everybody's thing. But I am here. I'm a Gaithersburg resident, so we have our own zoning text. But I'm here as a representative of the MCC-PTA, which I work very closely with on safe technology issues. And I'll tell you what's not squaring up with me and adding up is that I look back at all the work that you folks have done. In 2014, you came out, Mr. Berliner especially, and said black rubber crumb on the playground and on our artificial turf fields is not okay. It's being studied by health experts. It's not something we really want to touch, and there are viable alternatives. And you created a resolution, and it was to address and alleviate community concerns. So that's kind of the theme I looked at when I looked back at some of the work that you've done. The e-cigarette situation, and that was, I think, Mrs. Florine, you had come out very strongly to say the county should not wait for the federal government to act on this. So you did, which was terrific, and we thank you for that. Very recently, Council Member Leventhal, you supported condoms in the high schools to prevent the spread of disease. Well, cancer is the disease. Many of us have been touched by it. I personally have been very touched by it. My daughter passed away of it. I don't want to touch this stuff. I don't want cell towers near schools. I've asked repeatedly for setbacks from schools, 1,500 feet. I have given you guys lists of other communities that have done it. I know you know it's the right thing to do. I know there are ways to do it. I know what you're thinking, and I'm sure Mr. Reamer, we've talked about this a lot, that you cannot deny applications based on health. Well, what you can do is deny them based on RF emissions not being up to standards. So baking something into the ZTA that says that the towers need to comply and they need to be tested monthly, or if there's a concerned community or neighbor that says that tower doesn't sound right, it's buzzing more than it used to, I want it checked out. There should be something in here that has the owner of the pole come out and check it out so that the family knows that it's within limits. You know, I have an RF meter. I've been around. The limits are pretty high for the bioinitiative standard, not for the FCC. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa, for your thoughtful testimony. And that concludes this group of speakers. And I believe our last group for the evening, Robert Janku, Vicky Huo, Ian Dingwall, Cliff Sosin, Wei Shen, Mark Preslin, and James Sledge. Thanks. All right. No one will criticize you if you say "me too" in one direction or the other, but we are here to hear you however you may choose to speak in your 3 minutes. Robert Janku, you're first, so it's a different button probably if the light isn't coming on. There you go.
My name is Robert Janku. I live in Wesley. The art of politics should be about reaching consensus. Let's do it. In May of 2018, CNBC's David Faber asked Lowell McAdam, current chairman of Verizon and former CEO, about 5G cellular towers 25 feet from house. McAdam replied, "No one thought that was good." McAdam went on to say, "We are now designing the network for 2,000 feet from transmitter to receiver." The City of Gaithersburg's solution is to ban cell towers in the right-of-way on residential streets with underground utilities, allow stealth antennas on all buildings, and encourage 5G antennas on poles along arterial roads. City personnel will proactively negotiate with tower companies to place antennas on city-owned poles on arterial roads. Why isn't the rest of Montgomery County as good as Gaithersburg? With a Google map, I found homes in Wesley are within 2,000 feet of existing utility poles on arterial roads. For Duffife and Falls Grove, there may be a need for one modern 5G cellular tower. Thus, the proposed 16 towers in these 3 neighborhoods are reduced to 1. The county should revise the purpose of the tower committee to focus on proactively reaching out to the tower companies to pick sites with the least impact on the community. The idea that this ZTA will save me money is a farce. I might save a few dollars a month on my internet bill, but I will lose tens of thousands of dollars when I sell my house. We need a study on the impact of residential cell towers on tax revenue. My quick and dirty calculation shows the county losing somewhere between $500,000 to $1.5 million in revenue per year on the installation of 61 towers. That's a lot of money to ignore. The county needs to pause and reflect on this new reality. We either need to scrap this ZTA or rewrite it to reflect the 2,000-foot range of 5G signals. Consensus can be reached by basing ZTA on the modern 5G technology that McAdam cites. I would also like to add that the 911 call is very easily resolved. When the cell tower receives 911 call, no capacity, just boot somebody off. 911 should have priority. Thank you.
All right. Vicky Huo.
My name is Vicky Huo. I have lived at 7800 Brickyard Road, Potomac, Maryland for 31 years. The council is considering a zoning rules to make it even faster and easier to install very tall cell poles even closer to people's homes. But before you do so, I believe the council should fully fix the process for reviewing and approving cell poles, the process that mostly unchanged for 7 years. I want to tell you a story how a cell pole without tower committee recommendation, without a permit, yet installed in my front yard. The process utterly failed my neighbors and my family 7 years ago when the county allowed Pepco to remove and replace a 35-foot pole with a 68-foot pole that is about 40 feet away from our bedrooms. Pepco and Crown Castle stated The cell pole had been approved at a public meeting and as a result received a permit to construct this facility, referred to as Note 9. But none of that was correct. In fact, what the Tower Committee actually recommended in a public meeting on May 5th, 2010, was to install at 7701 Brickyard Road a wireless facility on a specific pole. That specific pole is across the street and 150 feet away from my house at 7800 Brickyard. This pole is situated more than 100 feet away from any houses in that neighborhood. The DPS permit clearly shows an address of 7701 Brickyard Road, but on their work order attached to the permit, someone decided to move Note 9 to 7800 Brickyard Road, my home. How does this possibly comply with applicable standards and procedures? So my neighbors and I petitioned the county council for help, and we were stunned to receive this response. Quote, even every council member agree with your recommendation to relocate the pole. We lack the authority to enforce that recommendation. So what happened is that it exposed, one, the Tower Committee has no responsibility for the final decision on the placement of cell poles. Second, DPS has no accountability for the accuracy of permit.
Thank you.
Nor compliances with Tower Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Ho.
3.
Excuse me, everyone has the same time. We
And
are
most
all
importantly,
equal.
when mistakes are made,
All right.
the council has no desire nor
All right.
to fix
Come on.
or enforce anything.
Thank you. All right. Ian Dingwall.
Good evening. I'm still Ian Dingwall. I'm here representing the Wesley Homeowners Association. We are 337 homes in North Potomac, Maryland. Frankly, I'm here to speak on behalf of myself as well. I moved here 40 years ago into a farmer's field at the time. Since that time, we've designed a park next to my home called DeFeef Park. We've put in natural gas to our home, cable. All this happened in cooperation with the county. Frankly, I don't feel the same kind of give and take with the county over the construction of small cell towers. To my surprise, outside my door is the proposed location of a cell tower. I know this because they've already installed a box marking where it will go. This happened without my knowledge. It just happened. I was outraged to find this. And then I happened to ask one of my neighbors, so what are they doing? What are they installing? What does it look like? And I heard that they're putting in a 5G small tower. First time I ever heard of a 5G small tower. And he said to me, I don't know what it's going to look like, but, you know, frankly, my concern is safety. I don't know what you propose to put in my front yard. I don't know how safe it is. I don't know if it's as safe as a microwave oven in my kitchen, or as troubling as perhaps the x-ray that my dentist takes of my teeth once a year. And I don't think you do either. And that's what concerns me. Doing a little research, I found out that the chairman and former CEO of Verizon says these things don't need to be located within 30 feet of your house. They can actually be put out on the old 4G towers that are out on our perimeter roads. And so that seems like a simple fix. Don't put 16 cell phone towers in my neighborhood. We don't believe Small towers belong in residential areas, and so there's an easy solution. Put it out. Put it out on the highways. And I would submit to you that if you don't know what the safety associated with these towers are, you should have the companies put a sticker on the tower. Warning, don't stand here for more than 10 minutes. Something that tells us what it is that this tower is emitting. And then we'll know, and we'll decide to move away if that's what we want to do. But to just simply say that the government won't let me
Thank you.
is a mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Dingwall. Cliff Sosin. All right. Lee Shen. All right. Mark Preslin. Nope. James Sledge. You get the last word tonight.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jim Sledge. I'm from Germantown. Glad to be number 44. And I do appreciate that this has been going on for a while, but I still think there are a lot of things that we have said over and over and over and aren't reflected in this ZTA. You say that you can't legislate based on health effects, yet here we are. You're changing the distance you can place it from your house from 60 feet to 30 feet. Isn't that legislating on that? So you're making a statement. At the same time, you're taking an action which is contrary to that statement. There's been a lot of evidence, which you are well aware of, and everyone in this room is well aware of, documenting the health effects. Making that change is irresponsible, and every one of you know it. I think there needs to be something that forces the providers to consider further distances from the house and prove to you that it's necessary to place them that close. There's nothing in here that protects us. We ask you, members of my community ask you about property values. There's nothing in this that protects us from property values going down because of these being placed closer to our homes. If you don't believe it to be a reasonable consideration, or you don't believe it to be the case, then certainly you should not be afraid to put something in here that would require the carriers to put funds aside to accommodate and take care of homeowners when it does occur. Post-installation reviews. There's nothing in here that requires that. There's nothing in here that shows coordination with those responsible for taking care of it. If it takes 7 years and something hasn't been taken care of, there's a problem. Fix it. You know how to fix it, and don't say it's not within your capability to do it. If you can't communicate with the rest of the people in our own county government, we've got a bigger problem here. Notification to homeowners. There's nothing in here that says when you're going to propose a tower close to a home that homeowners in that area have to be notified. That needs to be included. The last thing is, what happens to those towers that have already been approved by the Tower Committee which do not meet these zoning standards?
All right, folks. Thanks for participating. The committee, well, we actually haven't decided how we're going to move forward, but tonight's public hearing is over. Thank you very much.
Is crucial for the establishment of a village. And so in lower income communities, it's important that we invest more of our resources to support people as they strive to develop something that works for them.
And there are some partnerships with the faith community developing, I believe. Is that correct?
One exciting and interesting development is in Kemp Mill, where a group of faith communities have come together to develop a village for the entire area. And the Orthodox Jewish community and the Christian community are coming together to develop something that would serve everybody. In addition to that, there are other faith communities that are interested in supporting their local villages, and that has been a very exciting area of development.
Well, there are a lot of exciting things going on, and it keeps growing, and
Yep.
your job keeps getting bigger, I think.
Always something to do.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll close the show today with information about the county's Senior Dental Assistance Program.
Hey, mister, down here. You illegally passed the stop school bus. I'm placing you in timeout, and this timeout means big fines, plus you really could have hurt somebody. That's why school buses are being equipped with video cameras to help kids like me stay safe, so respect the bus.